now delighted to be joined online by Sarah Edmondson to discuss her new book, Scared, the True Story of How I Escaped Nxvism, the cult that's bound my life. Sarah, I suppose a Hollywood actress, sort of done many TV series, done many movies, done many films, living in Vancouver, in sort of Canada. We hear about these sort of things in relation to cults, and we think deep southern America, we think of the Amish, we think of places down there in Texas, we think of places maybe in Mexico, but a Hollywood actress in the height of Vancouver, in the high sort of sobriety sort of life that sort of brings. How did you come about finding yourself in probably the worst nightmare of your life?
You know, that is a really good question, and one of the reasons why I decided to go public and write about this is because people don't normally think of cults as in the same way that Nxivm, the group that I was a part of, has been portrayed. And it was a personal professional development program. I don't know if there's much of that in Ireland. I'd love to go there. I haven't been yet. It's on my list. But it's everywhere here. Everybody's trying to get ahead and be better and get more motivated and get on top of their lives and, you know, quote, work through their limitations. And this was a program that said it was that. And it was, you know, it was on the outside, but on the inside it was something else. It was something much more dark and sinister. So I got involved because I was an actress looking to go to the next level and to find more meaning and purpose in my life. And I got involved with the wrong group.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, I was just going to ask you, you said you wanted to go to the next level in your acting career. It wasn't a scenario where you were reaching out, trying to find something, missing sort of a jigsaw, coming off maybe a sort of private life issues where a breakup in a relationship or anything like that, and that probably led you astray. It was just something that you were just trying to better yourself in your career, and you thought, you saw, what made you see this? Was it recommended by friends to you, or what brought it to your attention?
Actually, it was recommended by a filmmaker, which is, you know, interesting because I know that you talk to a lot of filmmakers and actors, and he was a filmmaker that I really respected and looked up to, and ultimately I wanted to work with and collaborate with. And he said, well, if you like my film, you'll probably like this workshop I just took. So I thought I was getting involved in a workshop. I also saw it, and it definitely purported itself to be a community of people that were like-minded, supporting each other. And I think that's one thing that a lot of actors do look for, because it can be a kind of a cutthroat community. In Vancouver, it definitely is less of that maybe than Hollywood. But, you know, it's nice to find people who are like-minded and kind and helping each other succeed versus, you know, being envious or jealous of each other. And that's another reason why I joined. I wanted to feel supported, and I wanted to have a group of people that were boistering me up.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, the first time you ever went along to one of these meetings, I suppose it probably was what it said in the tin straight off the bat. Probably it was probably a workshop, maybe for the first 1 or 2 or 3 turns. And did you sort of think it was normal enough? What was your very first experience? Did you come away from it thinking, oh, that looks sort of promising, I'll go back to that again? Or I suppose there wasn't warning bells maybe until maybe 7, 8, the 9, 10 session where you were in it, or for the first month or two, did it just seem normal?
You know, it's interesting. One of the things the teachers tell you before the class even starts is to say, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel the urge to leave, that means that you were hitting on an issue, and that means that you should stay so you can work through that issue. And that's very manipulative and very strategic, because they put it to you that way, that successful people want to work on their limitations. So if you feel uncomfortable, it means you have a limitation, and if you leave, that means you're not successful. Okay. So truthfully, I had a lot of red flags right at the beginning, but I also trusted Mark, the person who told me about it, and he said, wait till day 3, and then decide. And by day 3, there's been enough indoctrination, which is a proper term for what most people know as brainwashing, which can happen very quickly in those settings when there's 12 to 14-hour days of curriculum and videos and discussions and truthfully, I had warning signs from the beginning. I overrode those because I thought it was my own issue, my own limitations, my own discomfort. But after that, I thought it was wonderful for many years. And then there came times every now and then where I thought, this is strange. And if I ever went to speak to anybody about that, it was always flipped back in my face. Are you familiar with the term gaslighting?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a lot of gaslighting that happened in Nxivm. I'd never heard of that term till after I got out. But I think for those of your listeners who've never been in a cult, if they can think of a time when they said something to somebody, like I want to, for example, in a relationship, somebody may say, like, it bothers me that you don't communicate with me, and somebody might say, well, why would I communicate with you when you're so angry all the time? Mm. So there's a flip back to the other person. It's the deflection. That's one example of gaslighting, but basically it makes the person with the issue feel crazy. And then in this case, I then needed to take more curriculum to resolve that craziness. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I suppose
they keep you dependent.
I suppose it sort of became an obsession, maybe a sort of a compulsive sort of disorder where you were constantly obsessing over it. And Keita Raniere, this so-called vanguard that he called himself, the very first time you went to this first Nxivm meeting, was his name mentioned straight away, or was it maybe the indoctrine, as you mentioned, the third or fourth session before you ever began to hear this name coming about?
No, they actually mention him right from the beginning, and They speak of him as being the philosophical founder, and they talk about how wonderful he is and how he's this genius and how he's a humanitarian and he created the most incredible curriculum in the world. So by the time people meet him, they generally look up to him and respect him without ever actually having seen him do any of the things they say that he does.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, you mentioned there you were in Nxvism for 12 years. Probably you're now sort of a year into it. You're sort of maybe a keen follower, a keen believer, and sort of, when did you start the initiation process began to go to the next level? Was it 6 months in? Was it a year in that you really began to notice a sort of a real sort of a surge or a change from these sort of workshops or these induction trainings? All of a sudden now it's going to these meetings or these group sort of things, or group mingling sort of parties or stuff like that.
It was actually more of a slow burn, I would say. It wasn't all of a sudden. It was, they really like to find people who are hard workers and very motivated to have an impact in the world, and they would kind of dangle the values of that person. So they would always be telling me that I could succeed in certain ways, and I just kept taking more curriculum, and it was like the metaphor of if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put a frog in water and you turn the heat up slowly, it dies. And that's the best way I can describe what it's like being in a cult, at least finding out that it was a destructive group. Because I do think there are a lot of groups out there that may seem weird or culty to some people, but they're not necessarily doing anything bad per se. They're just maybe on the fringe or a bit non-conventional. And I joked about that I was in a cult, that it was a cult of happy, successful people. We couldn't see the people on the outside doing, the personal development workshops and the parties and mingling, like you just said. We weren't living in Albany where all the dark and bizarre things were going on that we now know about through the trials, through the media. Yeah. So it was a very, very slow burn. Things really didn't get obviously weird to me until my last few months, which is, obviously what triggered me to get out and expose it with a number of people who decided that we weren't going to let these abuses continue anymore.
And I suppose, Sarah, you probably as an actress at the time as well, you would have probably heard of Alison Mack. She was in a Smallville, and an actress like that. You would probably been aware of her work. You would probably have heard, she's part of a Nxivm sort as well. And you probably would have thought nothing of it, and probably respected maybe Alison Mack as a sort of an actress. Or when did you know her involvement in the group straight from the off, or was she touted as one of these big celebrities celebrities that was part of Nxvism.
Yeah, I actually came in just before her, and then when somebody else brought her in, they recruited her, and she was definitely touted as, look at this successful actress. I think a lot of other actresses joined because of Allison. And I think that's what Keith relied on, is that he would use people like bait to get more people involved. And I think that's ultimately how a lot of things work. If someone says, oh, so-and-so is doing it, then it must be good. I mean, that's, for me, a huge part of why I did it. If Mark, the filmmaker, wasn't a big part of it, I probably wouldn't have done it, because I didn't relate to or have respect to anybody else around him. So, yeah, and that continued to go on. The more people in Hollywood joined, those people's names were used as bait to bring other people in. And it's unfortunate because it's not just Hollywood. Like the Dalai Lama, we were told, endorsed the program. He's since denied it, and I never saw him personally, so I can't say for sure. But Richard Branson was somebody who apparently took curriculum, and his name was used to validate what we were doing.
Yeah. And I suppose you mentioned there about these sessions and these intensive sort of sessions and paying this sort of money for these seminars, paying up on maybe €2,500 for a session or for an hour, and these sort of, it almost felt like a boot camp, a sort of such, where you're introduced to these fitness regimes and training and running and sort of stuff, and you're trying to better yourself as an actress, and all of a sudden you're in a boot camp. Does it sort of, are you sort of curiosity thinking to yourself, well, how's a boot camp gonna help me perform better or get me bigger roles in Hollywood?
By that point, to be frank, I kind of stopped acting, because one of the things that they did with me very slowly was have me replace acting as my priority with Nxivm, with ESP. My priority became being the coach and with helping people, which I love to do, and that's really how I feel most violated, actually. In addition to kind of putting my career aside, was that they took the thing that was most important to me and used me to bring more people in, because I thought I was helping people. And, obviously the truth of it all come to the surface now. And it's honestly, it's hard to wrap my head around, and to really, it's just embarrassing, to be honest, because we were advocates for this group, and we're out there saying, this is an amazing tool set. This will change your life.
Yeah.
But yeah, at that point, by the time I entered the boot camp, that's actually sort of when the most alarm bells started going off for me. I thought, this is not personal development anymore. This is extreme. And ultimately, that's started to be the end, the beginning of the end for me, when I started to wake up and see what I was really a part of.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, just before we get on to the next bit, we'll just advise our listeners there, if anyone's discouraged about what I'm going to say next, just bear in thought of what Sarah went through. It's despicable actions. And Sarah, I can't but ask, and I know if you don't want to talk about this, I fully understand, but the initiation sort of ritual, and I know it's been mentioned about, and the degrading of your sort of innocence, in relation to, we all know the human body, it's a private, it's a temple, everyone feels like their own body is their own sort of sacred, sort of holy ground. And when that's sort of been sort of taken away from you, and all of a sudden you're committing your body to this sort of entity, which, dare I say now, I know I'll sort of touch lightly on this, but in the initiation series, you were blindfolded. You had to take all your clothes off, there I say it, and pose your bare body exposed. And then to do that must have been a frightening, must have been a petrifying experience, and being blindfolded, and the thoughts going through your head at that time. Where did you feel? God, I mightn't get out of here alive. I could be, dare I say it, some man could set on me or something like that, or I just can't imagine what must have been going through your head at that time.
It was great questions, James, and I'll tell you, the night itself is something that's hard for me to revisit. I did it first after writing the book, doing press, but I've since kind of come to terms with I can't keep going back to that night because I find it re-traumatizing, know, but I will tell you, one of my main drives for writing the book was to explain how these things happen, and I know that when this hit the news, it was all like, my picture of my body and the branding was all over the news. A lot of people who didn't know the story would just think that's just stupid. Like, how could somebody agree to that? And my goal was to explain how does somebody to agree to it. And the fact is, I didn't agree to that. It was not consensual. I was blackmailed, and I went through a series of years of indoctrination that Keith set up so that he could make this happen. And that's how these groups work. Like I said, it's the frog in the water. If someone had invited me to a personal development ceremony or a seminar and said you're going to go through a ceremony where you have Keith's initials burnt into your flesh without anesthetics, of course I would have ran for the hills and gone to the authorities. And as much as I wish I'd never gone through that very traumatic, very harrowing, awful experience, it woke me up because ultimately I thought I was going to be a Nxivm member for life. We talked about, just so you know, there were Nxivm trainings in Ireland and in England, and it was slowly creeping to the world. Australia was some place where people were talking about opening centers. It was in Central America. It was in all over Mexico. It was very well established here in Vancouver, New York. It was growing, and even though Keith was a strange and disgusting little man, in my opinion, he was also very smart, and he had a plan. And I'm just glad that I woke up because it would probably still be going. And who knows? Maybe somebody else would have woken up and blown the whistle. But ultimately, all of it was worth it because here we are. He's in jail. So, and the women are no longer being abused. He abused a lot of women. And frankly, as crappy as my story is, it's nothing compared to what he did to other people.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, Sarah. You were in Vancouver. The main centre of the cult was in Albany. And if you're probably looking at where you experienced 12 years of Nxvism, you were in it and you were there in Vancouver. I say it, if you were 12 years in Albany and if you're that deep into that cult, we hear about stories like harem and what some women went through in Albany. Probably 15 to 20 women that he had open monogamous sexual sort of relationships with over the sort of years. Dare I say it, being in Vancouver rather than Albany, did it sort of, in one sense, did it expose, did you, I know you're exposed to an awful sort of a story and a background, but dare I say, it could have maybe been worse? Absolutely.
Being in Vancouver in many ways protected me from the worst that Keith was capable of, and that's the fortunate side of it. Unfortunately, I didn't see how bad and weird it was for so long because I was away from it. So, had I spent more time in Albany sooner, who knows what would have happened, but I always kept my distance from Keith, and I think part of that was what was left of my intuition, because I do think Keith's most destructive act was that he dismantled people's intuition so that they couldn't trust themselves anymore, and they became dependent on the group and on the doctrine to make all their decisions.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, one thing that struck me was you probably made friendships through this group and made friends with people in sort of powerful positions, and you probably trusted them as you probably have women friends, and but the one thing that struck me about it was almost like being in a sort of a mafia where there was a sort of a brotherhood. When orders were given, no matter what sort of friendship you had, these people that are higher up, they would take orders, they would put orders ahead of sort of friendship. And you mentioned there like Laura Solomon and a doctor and these women who you probably sort of respect, they look like natural women, but soon as they got their orders, they turned into complete monsters, dare I say it.
Yeah, I do think that's true. I think that the way that I've since learned that cults work, or any sort of hierarchy like this, is that that there's if you can imagine a lateral line, a horizontal line, and a vertical line, and that once you're in a cult, who you are your loyalty lies with the person above you in the hierarchy. So there's always a ranking system, and the leader is, of course, at the top. So oftentimes in cult, any friendship or even any couple, a relationship, anyone would always choose the leader or the person above them versus being loyal to their friend or anything along the horizontal line. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lauren, even though we were friends, she would be totally happy to lie to me to my face to protect Keith because Keith was above her.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, the dawning, the realization, the trauma you experienced, when you were probably talking about out for a while, you were probably talking to maybe your fiance or your husband or your family, and when did you finally gear up that courage to say, right, I need out, and I need now out ASAP?
You know, it happened very quickly. That's, I think, probably for me the most exciting part of the book. When I figured everything out, decided to go public, go speak with the FBI and New York Times, and telling my family, it all happened very, very, very quickly. I won't go into the details because I don't want to ruin the ending for anyone who might want to read the book. But
no problem.
It's crazy though. My family tells me how shocking it was that I was so in, and then suddenly I was so out.
Yeah,
and it was very quick.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sarah, at this time we'll mention that book again, Scared, the true story of how I escaped Nxvism, the cult that bound my life. Sarah Edmondson, when you look at probably the crimes and probably, do you sort of feel that maybe there was a vicious sort of nature to Alison Mack's character as well, or do you feel that she was brainwashed to such a coercive state that she was capable of carrying out those sorts of atrocities? I know Keith Raniere is facing probably life for imprisonment for his actions and crime, and deservedly so, but in terms of Alison Mack, do you just feel that her punishments are vindicated? Do you feel she deserved more? Do you feel that she was in some ways an unfortunate victim as well, or do you feel no sympathy towards her for her actions?
That's a tough question. It's not super black and white for me. I think that anyone around Keith, anyone who is in his orbit, in many ways is a victim. But that being said, she did certain things that I think she needs to be held accountable for. Did she sign up for this? Did she sign up to be a sex trafficker? Absolutely not. Did I sign up for this? Absolutely not. None of us signed up for this. So I think what needs to be noted is that he is, he's very manipulative in terms of how he can get people to do things for him. In the field they call it flying monkeys, referencing Wizard of Oz. That the narcissist has people doing things for them, and it's clear that those ideas weren't Alison. They were Keith's ideas. Yeah. But nevertheless, she did illegal acts, and she was very hurtful to a lot of people, and I don't know. And Sarah, I have no idea how she's doing, but I hope that she wakes up. That's all I can say.
And Sarah, do you find it hard moving forward with this experience, this life-changing experience, to trust people anymore? Did you have to take counselling for a while, yourself and your family? And do you find it very hard to sort of, anytime you meet a new person, to sort of feel a bit sort of nervous, be a pretension, or this person being my friend? Or is that always that bit of self-doubt? Is that going to remain with you for the rest of your life? Do you feel sort of, maybe I say, a bit tensed up even joining any club, or is it a gym or something going forward these days?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very, very hesitant about who I trust, and I'm much less trusting, I guess. I've had to hibernate. I've taken a lot of therapy. I'm still in therapy, and I think it will be a lifelong journey of healing. Most of us who are in the group have some sort of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which up until now I thought was just something that people who went to war or were in a car accident experience. But I now understand that betrayal, especially at this level, is something that can also cause PTSD, and that's something that I think I will always live with. I just have to learn how to not trigger it, and that's tough. I mean, it's an ongoing journey, and I have good days and bad days, but ultimately I got out. I'm better for it, and I now have here I am talking to you in Ireland. This is crazy, and I have this platform to help educate and shine light on something that is really dark, and not just in cults, but in many organizations, in religions, in relationships. It's abuses of power, and abuses of power is now, there's a whole new movement for people who are standing up and saying it's not okay, and voicing their concerns and sharing their stories, and these people are going to jail. So I'm happy to be part of that.
And for the future, for Sarah Edmondson, talking about the present and future, we know you had a budding, promising acting career before you got involved in Nxivm. You put that all aside. Coming out of the other side of Nxvism now, maybe 2-3 years on, have you got back to that love of acting? Have you got back to maybe small theatre shows, or did you have to find your way again and build just the sort of baby steps? And have you got involved in have you found the confidence to get involved in TV series or take that step, or is it just baby steps and just maybe going back to the theatre and get involved in plays, or has the acting dream, has it sort of faded away for you, or is it coming again?
Excuse me, it hasn't faded away, but I did have another baby about 7 months ago, so I took some time off for that process, and he's actually with me right now. I hope you don't mind him in the background.
No problem.
But he's wonderful. I've got 2 kids. My focus right now is motherhood and healing. I would, I think, like to act again. I actually went on my first audition last week.
Okay.
My first in a long
Congratulations.
time. And thank you. So we'll see. I'm at a bit of a crossroads, and no rush for me. But I never stopped doing voiceover, which is great because you can show up to do voiceover in your sweatpants, and you don't have to look any particular way. So that's always something that I know that I can do no matter what. And film and television, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And right now, I've got some important projects who are 7 months old and 5 years old, and they're my life.
Yeah, and I suppose lastly, Sarah Edmondson, for the sort of final minute of this interview, going back to your book, what would you want to say to the people of Ireland that'll pick up the Sarah Edmondson story about Nxvism and your life sort of experience? What do you hope that they'll sort of gain or achieve out of your read or your sort of story, or what sort of morale, and what must sort of feel a sort of nervous sort of reaction that people are reading your story all over the world, and how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel, definitely nervous, but also happy that it's being well received, and I hope that people have a chance to read it, and if not, that they feel, even through just hearing of the story, more inspired to either speak up if they're in an abusive power, an abusive relationship, to get out of it, or if they know somebody who they think is maybe in a cult, to feel empowered to help them. And then I think more personally, I feel like if I can help people understand that they don't need to go read a bunch of books and spend a bunch of money trying to fix themselves. And it's great to strive, it's great to improve oneself, but you don't need a guru, and that everything they need to know is within themselves. And that's something that I really want people to know, and I wish that I'd known when I was 28 and found Nxivm.
On that note, Sarah Edmondson, a pleasure talking to you on the airwaves this evening. Just one final note, we'll mention the book again, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped Nxvism, the cult that bound my life. Sarah Edmondson, a pleasure talking to you all the way over there in Vancouver from a nice, a bitterly dark night here in Ireland. We wish you all the best in your future endeavours, and with the two young ones, and hopefully we'll see you on our TV screens in the near future again. Take care, Sarah Edmondson.
Thank you so much. It was very sweet of you. All the best.